born into a very autocratic family. A very autocratic father and a mother who kept saying, wait until your dad gets home. And that's, of course, all I knew until I went to school. And then I got into classrooms, and I had very autocratic teachers. I would say, hey, how come we're doing this? And they would say, because I'm your teacher, and as long as you're in my classroom, you're going to do as I say. So I say, thanks for this very clear understanding of why we do these things. And then I go to college, graduate as a music teacher, and get a job as a music teacher. And this is all I knew. And music teachers, they stand on a box higher than anybody else. They wave this baton, a symbol of authority and power. And I was very good at that. And this, again, I use sarcasm to an art form. I mean, I could bury somebody with... So I didn't have many problems. And I taught elementary all the way through high school, so I had all grade levels and all. So it took a few instances when I realized this may not be the best approach. When you bury a trombone player, for doing something, and afterwards they don't play that well after that. It's called intonation. They don't play in tune. They're not ready to play. Attitude seems to go down, and I'm saying now, thinking, how many times can I humiliate somebody before this is really going to affect the sound of the group? So right away I kept thinking there should be another way. So my first year I began backing off of this approach, and yet sort of floundering, knowing what I didn't want to do was to embarrass students and this kind of a thing. So that summer I went back to the old masters in music to the University of Oregon at that time. So, and they suggested, as my brother said, that I take this course called The Maladjusted Child. I had some electives in the master's program, and so that sounded good. And I sat in a class of 150 other students, and this fellow by the name of Rudolf Dreikers, a psychiatrist from Chicago, again trying to find a place to try his new book, The Psychology in the Classroom. And for the first time, I heard of what we call a cognitive psychology, as opposed to your behaviorist model, stimulus response theory. As you know how that works, that's all I knew growing up. But the first bit about cognitive psychology was with him, where this is, as you know, a thinking psychology, an intrinsic approach as opposed to your extrinsic approach, which is your behaviorist model that you have. Well, all of a sudden, then I began looking at students differently, because Dreikers, as many of you know, maybe knows background, is Adler's psychology of social interest, where people are looking for a place in relationship to others in the group. And of course, in your family, you're born into your family very young, and there may be other siblings there, or other siblings may come along, and that's why parents will say, well, all my kids are different. Why is that? Well, they're all perceiving themselves as having a different place within the family, whether it be activities or attitudes or whatever that they would have. And it's the same way in a classroom, he said. So when students walk into your classroom, if they feel that they are valued, if they feel, and he used the term permanent value, if students feel valued or significant or have that sense of self-worth, he never used self-esteem, he would always say self-worth. If people feel they have that sense of self-worth, they're liable and very likely to be cooperative, to participate, to do as asked in all of those things. But if they feel insecure about their place within the group, by the way, this is their private logic. They may appear very secure to you, but they feel they're insecure. They're likely to act out in 4 goals of what he called misbehavior. And these 4 goals very quickly are attention getting. We all know the attention getting student. It can be the very loud one, the nuisance and all, or it could be the very soft one, what is called the lazy student, where they just don't get things done, and we're all saying, well, when are you going to get it? We do all of these things. Oh, I will, kind of a thing. But it still takes our time, he says, in which to do that. If that doesn't work, they move to power. We've all had power struggles with students, with relationships that we have. And it's a matter of, I'm the boss, you can't tell me, I'll tell you, and so forth. So we get into power struggle. If that doesn't work, it goes to revenge. That gets ugly. And we've had examples big high-profile examples around the country of kids that come back and say, I'll get you. Or it can be little things, something missing from your desk, or somebody lets air out of your car tires or something like that. This is not fun when students get that discouraged. And he says the fourth goal is when a student gives up entirely. They just absolutely give up. Those are difficult. So he gave me that sort of organization. But the biggest organization was at the beginning, because I found that when I'm humiliating a student, thinking I'm improving the situation, I'm taking on a student who already feels insecure about his or her place within the group. And so I was making things worse. So the first thing I decided after that summer when I went back to teaching is I'm going to stop a whole lot of stuff that I had been doing. And understanding when kids are acting up, whether it's attention getting or whatever organization you use, that they're based on a sense of insecure in their place in the group. Well, as you see, this whole light came about, and going back and how am I going to respond? He said the way to organize a classroom is to have a democratic classroom. Now, he did not have the language of a democratic classroom, except you ought to have classroom meetings periodically. I can hear, we're talking 1957, people, so this has been a while ago. Since 1957, and listening to him, the democratic classroom was the first time I'd simply heard that, as opposed to what we'll call an autocratic classroom as differing from what is called a permissive classroom. So there are three general sort of responses that you would have for that, one being the autocratic, the permissive, and then the democratic classroom, which we're going to flesh out these next 3 days, is what we mean by a democratic classroom. By the way, let me get this started right now. Democratic does not mean that the students vote on everything all the time. It simply means that the students' constitutional rights are recognized, and to teach them their rights and the responsibilities that go along with those rights. This is how we get into the balancing effect. So this was the first time I heard about a democratic classroom. Well, when I went back to teaching, it was absolutely incredible the difference that it made in the classroom with me and how I perceived a student that was acting out. First of all, you don't take it personally. You understand the student is crying out for help. Please, would a professional please help me with this, instead of punishing them or humiliating them and the other things that we had done. So that was my first, and then of course he was back summer after summer, and I would take classes and sit at his feet, and I did have a chance to get to that inner circle with him when people had sort of taken off and had done other things and that. But I decided to go to law school later on after I had become a counselor and so on. So I have had some experience there. So what today and the next 2 days we're going to flesh out this language that he kept talking about. How do we have a classroom environment where all kids that they feel they have permanent value, where they don't have to prove themselves every day? If they don't get that sticker that day, or the praise or the recognition of the teacher and all of this, do they still feel worthwhile? So many programs are based on that, I've got to prove myself. That's where the stress comes in. And as you talked about stress, that's what relieves that stress with the kids. And when the kids stress relief, you can't believe how that relieves us as a teacher or coach or whatever role that we have. As kids feel that sense of I don't have to prove myself, or I am valued as a person. Well, what do you mean valued as a person? How subtle can that be? How many of you know a teacher with a cup of coffee in hand that says, all right, students, no food or drink in the classroom? The teacher is simply saying to the students that my personal comforts are more important than yours. It has nothing to do with who the teacher is and who the students are. It has to do with human rights, one human being to another. And how can we all respect each other's humanity within the classroom? Well, I think it takes a language to do that. And this is the language that hopefully we'll be beginning to speak. And we have to cut out other language that we have done. As I said, I can see right now I had to cut out sarcasm and humiliating students. If I could cut this out, at least I cut out a whole lot of things that are exacerbated the problem. So there's
changes that I really had to make. And even today, I can't do it all the time. It just all of a sudden comes out and there it is. But the more I work at it, the more I can be effective in respecting the individuality of others too.